Okay, Mem Hey Beis. Vayitain is kol bevchi. He raised his voice within the context of crying. Vayishma Mitzrayim, Vayishma Beis Paro. The Egyptians heard, and the household of Paro heard. V'yom Yosef Elechov, Ani Yosef, Hodoch Avichoi. He said to his brothers, I am Yosef. Is my father still alive? Lo yochlu echov lanos oso kinivud miponov. His brothers were not able to answer him because they were overwhelmed in his presence. They were overwhelmed with embarrassment. Now, firstly, we had said that when the brothers had sold Yosef into slavery, they had made a cherem. They had made an excommunication that no one was permitted to reveal what happened. And the question is, for a cherem, you need 10 people. Who was the 10th? So the Chazal tell us the 10th was HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem agreed that he should be one of the 10. Why? So the commentator in the Mendish Tanchuma writes, because Hashem understood that if a word would get out that the brothers sold him and would get back to Yaakov, he would curse his children for what they had done. And if that should happen, there would not be a Jewish people. And if there would not be a Jewish people, there would not be a Kabbalist Torah at Sinai, and the objective of creation would never happen. Therefore, Hashem agreed that the cherem has to be made. Word cannot leak out. Word cannot get back to Yaakov. So that's the case. Therefore, even Yitzchok knew that Yosef was sold, but he was not permitted to share this with Yaakov, despite the fact that Yaakov was grieving all these years. And despite, as I said in Hebrews 4:0, that Yaakov was denied prophecy for 22 years, and Yitzchak was paying for this, but nevertheless he couldn't reveal it. So when Yosef said, Ani Yosef od Ovichoi, he says, Hashem achartu mosi Mitzrayim. Now, the fact is, how did he know? It is impossible. As much as he was able to divine through divination, as he put on this show, he knew each of the names, he knew where they grew up, he even knew the wood of their cradles, the type of wood that was used when they were small infants. But the fact is, whatever he knew, this is something which is an impossibility. It was impossible for him to know this. So when he said, Ani Yosef, they knew clearly this is Yosef. It couldn't be anybody else. Because even Hashem would not allow this to be divulged. So regardless what his powers are, or what his connections are, it's something which is impossible for him to know. So as a result of that, when they heard this, they knew this is the real man. And as I said, now all the dreams that he had come to reality, that these were not dreams of delusion, but rather this was prophecy. So now they see themselves behaving at a level which is so unconscionable. What they did to their brother, what they put him through, they can't live with themselves. So therefore they were overwhelmed with embarrassment that they couldn't respond. They couldn't respond to Yosef. V'yom Yosef Elechov, Yeshu no Elai v'goshu. Yosef said to his brothers, come close to me, and they came close. And now this was the final punchline. First he said, Ani Yosef, okay? Maybe just grasp me at straws. V'yom Ani Yosef achichem Hashem acharti Yosef mitzrayim. I am Yosef, who you sold me to Egypt. So this is clear and without a question. This piece of information is impossible for him to know unless he's Yosef, that he's the victim. Now, why did he say, Yeshu no Elai, come close to me? So Rashi cites Chazal. He saw them backing away. He says, I see my brothers are embarrassed. He called them with a softer tone and with literally supplicating them. and he showed him that he was circumcised. What is this all about? What is he? We already said that Adi Yosef Shemchatum Mitzrayim is a confirmation, without beyond any doubt that he's Yosef. Why do you have to tell him, come close and see that I'm circumcised? What does that add to the confirmation that he's Yosef? But yet, if he did it, it had to be done. What was he trying to communicate to his brothers? What does the circumcision represent? It's the bris kodesh, right? It's the holy covenant. Engraved in our flesh, we are God's subjects. We are answerable to Hashem. As a subject is answerable to the king, we are fully answerable. What he's showing him is that I may be Yosef. We'll see later. Even when Yosef said he was still alive, and he says, I must go to Egypt to see my son before I die, Yaakov was a little wary until he saw the wagons coming. When it says, when he saw the wagons, it says, Vatri Ruach Yaakov. Only then was his prophecy restored. And he says, now I know Yosef is alive. What is it all about? Being away for so many years, being in an environment which is not under the umbrella of Yaakov's influence. You never know what exile could do. And he understood what Egypt was all about. Being all by himself. He may be Yosef, may be alive, but he's not my same son. He's not that son who was compromised. Yaakov says, Im Lovan Garti Targum Shamarti. Yaakov said, despite the fact I was with Lavan, I did not learn from his evil ways. I wasn't even scathed, even as an iota, with him or the environment. The question is, well, what's Yosef? He may be alive, but until he saw the agolos, the wagons, which is an indication, the last thing they had studied the Egel Aruf, as we'll discuss later. Only then did he know that Yosef is the same Yosef. He's still intact spiritually. Not only physically is alive, he is that same spiritual person as when he had left him. By showing his brothers the circumcision, I may be Yosef, but what he's saying is, I'm bound to a higher power. I'm that same spiritual person. I haven't become hardened because of anything that's transpired in these 22 years that I haven't seen you. That's exactly what he's saying. Come close, look, see my circumcision. What I am, I'm bound to that, what that circumcision represents. So it wasn't enough knowing that he's Yosef. Now they know he's Yosef. That you sold me to Egypt, because the only way he can know that, only if he's the person. But the question is, have you changed over the years? What do you represent now? Maybe you'll take revenge, maybe whatever. On the Yosef, see that I'm circumcised as you're circumcised. I'm bound no less than you people are bound. Therefore, I will treat you as if nothing happened in the past. Now don't be depressed or saddened. And you shouldn't be upset with yourselves that you sold me here. Because Hashem has sent me for the sake of survival before you. If 2 years of famine already have taken place, there's going to be another 5 years of famine. So if that's the case, I'm here to guarantee your survival. And Hashem has sent me before you to establish, to put a remnant in the land that you should survive. To establish you in a context to be a great Plato. Plato means a great remnant. not meaning from this remnant of 70 people is going to grow, is going to develop a great nation. So what is he telling them? He's putting in context now that as bad as what they did, it's not as bad as what they even though their intention was not appropriate. But ultimately, what turned out to be the greatest blessing of my life was it was all God's plan. And the only way I could have arrived here was only the way it evolved, the way things unfolded. I was sent there specifically for that purpose. 1 second. So, and he's speaking to them, as it says, he spoke to them softly. Look, there's always a question. They suspect, you never know. Because we see even at the end, even after Yaakov came, and Yaakov ultimately passes away, there was suspect that he was just waiting to take revenge. And that's when they threw themselves on the ground before him, and they said, our father said you should treat us well, despite everything. So there was always this little slight inkling of suspect, that he was only doing this for the sake of his father. But in terms of the bad feelings he had for them, that really, even though maybe they diminished to a degree, but he still had that axe to grind. And ultimately, he was going to take revenge. That was always in the back of their minds. But again, the way he's articulating, the way he's explaining it, and he's putting the context, it's not as bad as you think it is. Because without this, there'll be no future. So they understand he's processing it in a context that he's lessening their level of liability, their level of culpability. He's trying to convince them this. We'll see in a moment. So that what he's saying now, if that's the case, he did a mitzvah. If I was sent here lemichya, lefleto, to guarantee the survival that there should be a future, there should be Jewish people. So if that's the case, you did something of great value, great merit. You should be lauded for this. But factually, you're not the ones who sent me here. Ki Elokim, it was God's plan. We'll discuss this in a moment. Now, let's stop for a moment. There's a question which is asked by the Ramban, by the Brisbane Absorim, the comment between the parts that the Jews are going to be enslaved, they're going to be afflicted. And ultimately, the nation that's going to enslave you, they will be judged, they're going to be punished. And then you're going to go out with great wealth. So Ramban asks a question, if it was preordained that the Jews should be enslaved in Egypt, it says, they'll be enslaved and they'll be afflicted, so why were the Egyptians punished? What they did was a mitzvah. Right? That was the will of Hashem, that they should what? They should be enslaved and afflicted. So that the Egyptians did what they did. They did a mitzvah. So you say, well, they didn't have to be the ones. What do you mean? He cites somebody who says, but they didn't have to be the ones. What do you mean? We say regarding a mitzvah, Kol HaKodim Zocha, the first one to do a mitzvah, he's meritorious. So therefore they jumped at the opportunity to do the mitzvah. So why are they held accountable for enslaving us, the Egyptians? So the Ramban answers, even though it was preordained, but in terms of the way it was done, we had to go into exile. But the way the Egyptians had treated us and imposed that bondage, it was not because God had pre-decreed that it should be. They did it on their own account. Give you an example. Hitler, Yimach Shemo Zichro, he could only do what he did only because it was meant to be, there should be Holocaust. Why there was Holocaust, we're not explaining. But there was a Midas Adin, there was an attribute of justice on Jewish people. 6 million Jews had to be murdered, or maybe more than that. That was preordained. Hitler could only do it because God allowed him to do it. And God gave him the means to do it. That he was able to succeed to the degree he succeeded. But why did he do it? He did it because he himself was who he was. Because he was Amalek. So if that's the case, he has personal accountability for whatever he did. The Egyptians, when they did it, did they do it because they were Shluchei Hashem, they were God's agents? to do an agency? Definitely not. They did it because of their own malice, their own hate, and their own levels of insecurity. That's why they did it. Therefore, they're fully held accountable. That's what it was. Now, why did the brothers sell Yosef into slavery? Because they believed that he was out to destroy them. So although it was a mistake, but factually, it was their choice to process it the way they did. It wasn't because God said he should be sold, and ultimately he should be the viceroy of Egypt, that he should be the provider. That wasn't the motivation. It was purely because of their own levels of insecurity and misreading of what was going on. And they brought all the suffering to their father because even though the father was meant to be punished because he denied his parents 22 years of kibbur avim, doesn't make a difference. But you're the ones who caused that, and that was not your objective. As a result of that, you have accountability. So that's what he's telling them now. In the ultimate, it just takes off the edge off the pain. But factually, you people are not the one who sent me here. That wasn't your intention. Ki Elokim. That I ended up in this position and this location and my power and every aspect of who I am has nothing to do with you. That's Elokim. That was preordained by Hashem. V'simeni av leparo. Ul'odel chobeso. I am the personal av, the counselor to Paro, his personal advisor, and a master of his whole household. I'm the ruler over Egypt. Who put me in this position? It's Elokim. Your action ultimately brought it about, but it was Elokim. Your action, your intent was to destroy me. For whatever reason, even though it was for you believe it was for your own survival, but it doesn't make a difference.
In other situations where a Beit Din executes a judgment based on the facts presented to them, the Beit Din members are not held accountable if it winds up being the wrong judgment or the wrong outcome. In this instance, similarly, the brothers formed the Beit Din, decided that this was the punishment to be awarded to Yosef. Should they or are they held accountable?
Good. Now, if there's any conflict of interest or bias, initially, the court has to actually disqualify themselves. They're not permitted to evaluate information. Even the witnesses are coming, their ability to interrogate, their ability to have judgment, it's impaired. Their ability is impaired. That case is speaking about the judges are totally unrelated to any of the events that took place. Now, witnesses come, they follow the process which is provided by the Torah, interrogation, everything else. They deliberate as the Torah says they should deliberate, and they rule. So they followed the process to the T in every sense of the word, and they give a verdict. Later, it's found out the witnesses who originally provided the information were conspiring witnesses. And the Torah says when you have conspiring witnesses, it's confirmed that the information was false. But it's not a shortcoming in the Bezdin, in the court. The court followed the procedure as God dictated the procedure. That's the case of the court. Therefore, there's no liability whatsoever for the court itself. Over here, there was a contentious relationship, and there was jealousy because they felt that their father favored Yosef over them. But the whole thing was wrong. And they thought, why is he all of a sudden valuing when he bought him to sell his pasim? Because he's tail-bearing. And due to the tail-bearing, that's why Yaakov is giving Yosef greater value. Only because they've been diminished, that's why he made this differentiation between them and the others. But all that was based on a mistake. I mean, it was the understanding was totally wrong. It was due to their own shortcoming. Therefore, as a result of this, there is very serious levels of liability, accountability, and that's why we have the Asar Hugi Malchus, that because they sold Yosef into slavery, because of the verdict would have been similar to the Bezdin, why do we have to lose the 10 of the greatest Torah sages from Sinai till that moment to atone for the sin of the brother selling the brother into slavery.
Sure, yeah.